One. And we are recording with Dr. Roger Hodkinson on Saturday, September 16th, 2023 at 2:04 p.m. Eastern time to talk about, amongst other things, you said extremely long COVID symptoms or injury symptoms, as well as organ transplant rejections, I would imagine, regarding the COVID-19 vaccine. But Dr. Hodkinson, could you introduce yourself for those of my listeners who don't know about you, and then we can jump right into it.
Sure. I've had a long career. I won't bore the listeners with everything I've done. I've done just about everything you could think of in pathology, which is my speciality. Graduate of Cambridge, teaching career, Royal College examiner in pathology to make sure that your wife's breast biopsies were being read correctly, rather an important role. Despite which the College of American Pathologists decided to get rid of me because I was spreading misinformation. The only problem with the accusation was they wouldn't tell me the information I was missing. Nonetheless, I've been involved in big stuff for decades. I took on big tobacco 40 years ago as the lone voice in Canada, and we achieved modest successes. COVID is big stuff. It's highlighted my career to be putting in my oar and pulling hard as someone who was very traditionally and rigorously trained and can smell a rat a mile away. So that's my second big thing is COVID. And the third big thing that we'll come to later on is I'm chairman of an American biotech company that's shortly going public with this isn't a selling pitch. It's just to educate people that there is a transformation coming in the testing for so-called pandemics, and I'll elaborate on that later. So yeah, I've done a lot of stuff, and I am a different person now than I was 4 years ago. I distrust just about everything out there. Politics, medicine, WHO, CDC, alphabet agencies, colleges of physicians and surgeons, etc., etc., etc. One thing I do trust is the common sense of everyone that's listening, because that's all you needed to carry you through this mad, mad period in human history. That's my introduction, Tommy.
It's a good one. Yeah, I think that's probably been the take-home effect on most of us is, in short, a complete lack of trust in everything, which I think in a sense is a good thing. It was probably always needed, and it's a good way to just go about your life. If it's worth it, it'll be true, and if it's not, you'll sniff it out. So it's kind of a good MO to not trust anything.
Tonight, I'm going to what I call hallowed ground. It's the asphalt where the truckers convoy started over 3 years ago. I'll be addressing them for a new convoy that's going to the trial of Artur Pawlowski, a pastor who they want to jail for preaching to the truckers. That's hallowed ground, and I'll be there tonight, and I'll be there next Monday in court when Artur is being sentenced. We hope that he will not go directly to jail, but what is unfolding with him is a seminal moment in Canadian history when the state has to be tackled and brought down peacefully, because of the horrendous things that have been going on under the guise of some fictitious, massive killer virus, which was, of course, no such thing.
But can you maybe enlighten me as to what's going on with Otto?
I'm sorry?
Could you please enlighten me with what's going on with the preacher?
Yes. Artur Pawlowski, for years, was a preacher for the poor, the street people in Calgary. He still does run soup kitchen every weekend. A simply wonderful man, as honest and dedicated and ethical as you could possibly imagine. One of the very rare preachers who stood up against the state. Anyway, he didn't close his church. He was arrested for that on a rainy, high-speed highway, dragged on his knees, handcuffed, with camera footage to show it. He's been arrested many times. He's been in jail. He's now on bail with a probation officer. To face his sentencing, the final appeal is over. On Monday, he is in a courthouse that could haul him off to jail for up to 10 years for simply preaching to truckers peacefully. There was no excitement to violence. It's like January 6th all over again, totally trumped up charges. So this is an incredibly brave man. He's a martyr already, even if he doesn't go to jail. And it's an honor to go down and see what happens. He had a go at politics in the last provincial election. I went door knocking with him because I admire him so much. That's the man, and I'll give you the update next week, or we can have another conversation, Tommy.
Sure, absolutely.
Let me say. Sorry, I wanted to say one more thing. I beg your pardon.
Sure.
The tragedy here is, of course, in the big picture of things, this would never have happened if two mighty forces had stood up and been counted to a man. Medicine, which of course failed because they put their pocketbook first. We know all about that. But even more importantly, the church. Because historically, when the church has taken on the state in a unified way, the church always wins. They chose not to. They chose to be more concerned about their promotion in the church hierarchy. The way I describe it is, instead of preaching to their flock, supporting them at a time of desperate need, those decisions around the breakfast table about whether to give in and put bread on the table or not. The way I describe those despicable, decomposing maggots of preachers is that they were pissing behind their pulpit when everyone else was dying. That's not exactly what Jesus did in the temple. He turned the tables over and he took the punishment for it. Instead of that, they deserted their flocks, and they deserve to be in jail along with the Faucis and Burkes and so on. Absolutely. Make no mistake, Tommy, given the scale of what's happened, approximately, arguably, but roughly correct, 20 million 20 million deaths internationally from this experimental product. Given the scale of that, which is utterly unprecedented in human and medical history, I want vengeance, cold vengeance. Don't talk to me about amnesty. I want these bastards in jail after due process, but I want them in jail because the catastrophe isn't even over. People think that because they can fly and they don't have to wear those breathing barriers, diapers on their faces anymore, they think it's over, but it ain't. It'll have a tail, and we're going to talk about that.
Beautifully said. Yeah, let's get into then the organ transplant rejection. Is that regarding those who have received the vaccine?
Yeah. In Canada, we've seen at least 2 individuals die on the transplant list for which they've been accepted for the very simple reason they refused to be vaccinated. A medical team killed them. That was state-sanctioned murder administered by medicine. Those 2 people would be alive today. if they'd been allowed to have their transplant, which they desperately needed, without succumbing to the coercion, intimidation by the state and by the institutions that were merely their stooges. The tragedy is, as we're now discovering, it's actually the other way around. First off, the vaccine protects you from virtually nothing. There's been no double-blinded, controlled clinical trials, placebo-controlled trials, to show anything beneficial, including the risk of getting infected, the risk of hospitalization, the risk of dying, etc. None of it's been proven. What we do know is that it's not just that it was unnecessary, but we do know that the vaccine, as I said, has been killing in large numbers. But with respect to transplants specifically, one of the mechanisms by which the clot shot, which is a better description for it, one of the mechanisms, I'm talking, as we say in medicine, pathophysiologically, one of the mechanisms by which it happens is by an attack on blood vessels because of the receptor, the ACE2 receptor, that lines every blood vessel in the body that the spike protein attaches to. And then all hell breaks loose because of the inflammation that takes place. The point is that the transplanted organs themselves, of course, have a network of blood vessels and capillaries, and those transplants will be attacked. They are not immune from attack, just like every other organ in the body. There are already reports of transplants being rejected shortly after so-called vaccination. So the argument is actually the opposite way around. What we did have was academic snots, self-righteous little pricks, running these hospital programs. And it would have been one individual, the senior person that everyone was afraid of, who called the shot. And as a result, 2 people, at least, in Canada, and probably others internationally, died. They were murdered. That's not exactly what physicians are supposed to do. That wasn't how I was trained.
What is it about the transplant? So I understand the idea of somebody dying on the waiting list because they didn't get the vaccine, and that's a violation of medical ethics in its own right. But what about the actual transplanted organ? What about the cases where the individual rejected the organ? Well, what's the cause of that?
Well, as I said, that was probably multifactorial, but the principal one is an attack on the blood vessels in the transplanted organ.
Gotcha.
When the capillaries are attacked, are denuded of their protective covering of the cells lining every capillary, when that inflammatory process starts, it initiates a thrombotic process, blood clotting process. Now, when a capillary clogs with a blood clot, the net result is unavoidable cell death of the cells that it provides oxygen and glucose to. And the transplanted organ would be no different from that.
All right. Well, kind of seems like dog shit. So how is this not a more covered thing then? Is it only, and then, so back to the actual organ rejection, is it only 2 people in Canada?
That we know of that have hit the media. There may well have been others that have gone silently into the night. We don't know. But it's like everything else. They're the canary in the coal mine. They expose the utterly disgusting corruption in our own profession. People putting their jobs, meaning their income, their pensions, because we're talking about academic positions here. Physicians who don't deserve the name, putting their position and income ahead of their patients. We used to go into medicine to serve humanity, not to benefit from humanity. That came later. Yes, we got a title, we got respect. But you know what? We earned that. We earned the respect of that title over centuries.
So how does this alter?
But we've lost it like that. All for the money. The money. It was never money that made us go into medicine. We went into medicine to serve humanity.
How does this then alter your I can only imagine, but how does this alter your perception of the new upcoming, which is kind of a ridiculous thing to even say, but the new universal shot that's coming out?
Well, it's beyond useless. It's for yesterday's virus. Everyone must realize that RNA viruses constantly mutate. Their copying is not perfect, like it is which is more or less the case for DNA viruses. But RNA viruses, when they multiply, they mutate. They're not intelligent beings. They don't do that to evade anything. It's just the nature of how they reproduce. And some of those mutations happen to have superior survival characteristics, which is, of course, the intent of life is to persist and reproduce. And so these mutations, which are different, emerge regularly. And there's nothing more guaranteed to prolong a pandemic, so-called, with an RNA virus than to constantly think you can get ahead of it. It's a fool's game. By the time you've got even a traditional vaccine, witness the flu vaccine, by the time you've got a vaccine specifically for that particular variant, it has mutated. It's got ahead of you. You're chasing rainbows. It cannot work. By definition, it's medical dogma. They do it anyway. Because we are your saviors. We are your breast-beating saviors. We are the truth. As per Fauci, I am the science. Or that smirking little snot bag in New Zealand, Jacinda. I am the truth. These idiocrats, as I prefer to call them, these idiocrats know dick. It is impossible to get ahead of an RNA virus. It will not happen. What you must do is use common sense and simply accommodate to the reality that you can't escape it, by no means known to science, whether it's masks or vaccinations or social distancing, whatever, it will not work. You have to accommodate. You have to be sensible, like we were pre-COVID. We didn't visit Granny when we had a runny nose and cough. We were smart, common sense, ordinary people, and it worked. That's all that was needed. But that was thrown out of the window. We had idiocrats running the asylum.
Now, to pivot from there, per our email, you said that there are really long vax complications.
Yeah.
What are those?
Okay. Everyone's heard about the current impossibly large number of neurologic cardiovascular complications, thromboses, strokes, heart attacks, etc. Everyone's heard about that. It's growing constantly, and it's part of that, as I said, the 20 million that they don't want to quantify and study themselves because they're scared shitless of being found responsible for the scale of that calamity. But it goes much beyond that, Tommy, much beyond that, because of two factors. The first one is there is dogma in molecular biology in which there's a one-way track from DNA, the code that we all have in our nucleus of every cell. The DNA code translates into RNA in the cytoplasm, and it's the RNA that makes protein, otherwise known as enzymes, that makes all those little bags called cells work harmoniously. It was a one-way system, DNA to RNA to protein. That was dogma. We now know that, in fact, it can go the other way. We now know, and that process is called reverse transcription.
Mm-hmm.
We now know that RNA can actually be permanently installed into DNA. There's actually incredible historical evidence for that, because a substantial portion of our own genome is actually viral in origin from hundreds of thousands, millions of years ago. We know that's happened repeatedly over time.
Yeah.
But it was ignored with respect to this experimental gene therapy. It's been shown to happen in what we call in vitro, in a petri dish with liver cells. It's been shown very clearly by MIT, very capable researchers, and been repeated that, in fact, reverse transcription of COVID, of the mRNA in the COVID so-called vaccination, does in fact get installed in the DNA, in the nucleus of these liver cells. That's incontrovertible evidence. What has not happened and not been studied yet, for reasons that I'll get into, is evidence in living individuals who received that experimental therapy. You might think, do you think that's important? Because if in fact that is shown to be happening in living people as opposed to in a petri dish, that becomes what we call transgenerational. That means you will pass it on in your gametes, in your spermatozoa and ova, to future generations. It is permanent. And where it installs itself in your DNA, is it random? Is it in a specific place? Is it next to genes that have bad potential? We call them oncogenes. Is it installed there, or is it random? What's the frequency of it? Does it happen at all? Excuse me. Given the huge societal importance of that, you'd like to think it would be investigated on a war footing.
Mm-hmm.
Not a peep. That's the first one. That's the first very worrying, perhaps the most worrying problem. The other problem is something that's going to be delayed conveniently, maybe 20 years. And it's this. We know that one of the methods by which the clot shot produces its problems is with thrombosis, clotting in blood vessels. It can be big blood vessels, like the veins in your leg, producing a pulmonary embolus. But it can also be diffuse in very small blood vessels we call capillaries. And as I said, if a capillary gets blocked, it kills the cells that it supplies. Now, that is a random, erratic process. Depends upon how much of the clot shot you received, which was, of course, incredibly variable given the terrible quality assurance in manufacturing. But some people will have killed off a lot of their cells, not sufficiently to present with a classic syndrome like a stroke and a heart attack, but killed all the same, and not definable, not measurable medically by any conceivable means. The translation of that is ominous, because when you get to my age, you depend upon a reserve in your key organs to keep you going. All our cells randomly die with time. And if you reduce the reserve that you have, there is the very worrying potential of an absolute tsunami of dementia and heart disease, not so much kidney disease, because the kidneys regenerate. If you cut one kidney out, the other one doubles in size. But the brain and the heart do not. And the reserve of those organs in some people, without knowing it, will have been compromised to the extent that they will die early. That is a point in the future. It won't happen suddenly, it'll happen gradually. But by the time that's measured and documented, of course, Fauci and Birx and the other people responsible for this at the WHO and so on, they'll be dead and buried, conveniently. They may even be already dead in jail. But that is a very, very worrying scenario. The transgenerational change of our genome, for no reason whatsoever, untested, no genotoxicity, as we call it, performed, but also a healthcare system that's already stretched to the limit in Western countries, that is utterly unprepared for a tsunami of older people presenting in large numbers with very serious medical conditions that are labor and cost intensive. That is extraordinarily worrying. We all hope it's not going to happen, obviously. But it's a major, major possibility.
And to carry over generations. I mean, yeah, I mean, by definition, we couldn't know whether or not that happens for decades more, right?
Well, the insertion into the genome, the reverse transcription, that could be known next week.
Okay.
If they wanted to study it. But you see the problem, Tommy, is that it's the criminals who are doing the prosecution. And the criminals have all the money. 90-odd% of all research done internationally is controlled by Fauci, the Wellcome Foundation, Gates, and co. The very criminals that don't want to know. So it's extraordinarily difficult for researchers to find money now to do the studies of the nature I was describing.
Gotcha. So then it would stand to reason that they probably are doing the research somewhere. They're just not making it public.
Well, even if you found the money and you think you have something to publish, guess what? The corruption in medicine extends its tentacles everywhere. The journals themselves are corrupt. They're bought and paid for by Big Pharma. They will not publish evidence to the contrary. Attempts to do so get denied. I was one of the authors with Peter McCullough and Dr. Makis locally. Both of us live in Edmonton. We are attempting to get published in a major journal the very first study of deaths after vaccination. And to what extent are they attributable to the vaccination itself? And we showed that 74% thereabouts of deaths shortly after the vax are due to the vax. Do you think we can get that published? We've been rejected 3 times. The Lancet, the BMJ, JAMA. They've rejected the paper, despite the fact that we all have absolutely blue chip credentials, Peter McCullough in particular, much more so than me. That, I think you can start to appreciate the barriers that there are for getting information out there and convincing politicians that if they don't stand up and do the big mea culpa, we're going to put those bastards in jail.
Do you think then on more of like a meta picture, there's really no way for this to rectify itself? I mean, if the corruption is this thorough and this widespread, there was never going to be some top-down change. The car was just going to keep running until it smashed into the wall. And it was going to be as horrible as we all thought it would be. But there's really kind of no way this thing was ever going to get fixed. It was
I would disagree with you I am I think in the short term, the horror show is going to continue, and in the long term with deaths. But in terms of restructuring the organizations that are responsible, first off, I put great hope in what Trump will do when he's re-elected. I think there's going to be blood in the gutter, with institutions being, as Paul Alexander famously said, the only way to solve this is to burn them down to the studs, to purloin his phrase. So that's certainly hopeful when Trump gets in again. The other thing, I'm an Albertan. Believe it or not, Alberta could become a beacon for the rest of the world, because the very process that started here with the truckers declared the enemy. That was a most seminal moment. We were all accommodating. The stealth attack was being very successful, but the truckers blew the whistle for everyone, and it expanded from their particular issue, obviously, to exposing the enemy. You can't fight a war if you don't know who the enemy is. So that process, that realization of how corrupt everything is, that is the bedrock for attempting what I believe to be a very successful process that will result in an independent Republic of Alberta. Already 25% of the people, without a political leader running it, already 25% of the population of Alberta is very much in favor of independence from Ottawa. Canada is dead and buried. And an independent Republic of Alberta, free of the constraints of Ottawa, could not just be the freest, happiest, most prosperous place on earth, but it could redefine those institutions. And we could become, as I said, a beacon for the rest of the world. So that's medium term. I'm positive in the medium term. But in order to get there, I would beg politicians, and they're doing a damn good job at achieving what I'm suggesting. I'd beg the politicians like yours and ours, these clowns that are attempting to run a complex show, I would beg them to make it worse. Because only by hitting people in the pocketbook, not the converted, the small percentage that listen to your show and are really educated in all of this, but the mass of the population who've been fire hosed very successfully, 24/7 for 4 years. Those people have never heard your message. They're happy right now. They can travel. The masks have come off, etc., etc. Those people have to be made angry at their loss of money. We need mortgage defaults en masse. We need breadlines, soup kitchens. Only when you hit people in the pocketbook are they going to respond. They will accommodate to the loss of freedom until they're totally lost. Accommodate, 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 accommodate. Be nice people. But hit them in the pocketbook when they're starving, when they don't have shelter. That's a different story. So if we can get to that point, I think there's certainly encouragement that we may see a bright tomorrow. But we need revolution, not evolution, to get out of this.
It does kind of seem to be the inevitable end to all of this. So I don't really see a way that it kind of gets back on the tracks in a civil manner. I would like for it to. I don't realistically see that happening, which is kind of depressing, but it's also seems to be far bigger than me and my wants. So it's really nothing to do but, prepare for it. Regarding your biotech company,
right?
What are the new forms of testing? And for everybody listening, I don't get a penny from Dr. Hodkinson. This is me asking. What are the forms of testing?
And nor do I. This isn't a company promotion at all.
Fair.
What I want to do is give an additional element of hope for the future. To a large degree, the mess that we're in and the opportunity we gave to idiocrats to control us was because of the fear, the pandemic of fear that was seen in every newspaper every morning. The rising graph of cases, it's coming to get you. You're going to die tomorrow. What a case was a positive, so-called positive PCR test. 95 to 97% of people who were asymptomatic, who had nothing wrong with them whatsoever, even if they'd been in contact with someone with COVID, 97% of those results were false positives. It gets very technical as to why that happened. They knew it was happening. It's a terrible methodology, and it created the fear pandemic. That allowed the idiocrats to use their muscle to control you, because it never was anything close to the pandemic that they claimed. In fact, relatively few people, no more than in a regular flu season, relatively few people died actually and only because of COVID. The vast majority of them, sadly, talking as a pathologist now, sadly, we're going to die shortly anyway from their underlying comorbidities. And COVID was merely the last straw. They did not die of COVID. They died of their underlying cancer and heart disease. That was a big lie. But of course, the PCR test made you fearful, made you accommodate, made you willing to take an experimental product that they knew hadn't been tested and that they knew from their initial clinical trials was killing people in the clinical trial. They knew that. They went ahead anyway. So that's the backdrop of testing and how it was a very large factor in promoting fear and therefore the consequences that the politicians introduced. Fast forward. There is a technology out there that's been known for 40 years. Fred Sanger got the Nobel Prize for what's called DNA sequencing. That's how the Genome Project was done. It's the gold standard of identifying anything, whether it's a rhinoceros or a butterfly or COVID-19. But it's never been commercialized for the very simple reason that you can only do one test at a time. That's not real medicine. Real medicine consists of what's called the unknown. You have a sick person in front of you who's presented with what we call a syndrome. A syndrome is a set of symptoms and findings on examination that could be due to many different things. In the case of infection, different types of viruses and bacteria and fungi and maybe even parasites. That's real clinical medicine. What you're dealing with is an unknown, and you need a technology that is deadly accurate, based upon DNA sequencing, the gold standard, but which can test for all of those, or most of those possible causes, simultaneously, cost effectively, in one test at one time, to give accurate, true positive results and not 97% false positive results. Well, that's what we have. We're about to go commercial with an IPO to follow. I'm not going to mention the name of the company. This isn't a commercial at all. I'm simply giving people hope that there are ways about to be launched that will prevent at least that excuse for an attack on you. The other thing that's happening on a diagnostic side, we're not involved with because it's a protein test, not a DNA test. And that is, there are two companies now about to commercialize a test for spike protein. before people go through the so-called detoxification process using nattokinase, widely available, but also through the Wellness Company, of which I'm a proud board member in the States. Nattokinase is a very effective agent at preventing the consequences of long COVID and getting rid of the spike protein. But it would be awfully nice to know before you engage in a long-term so-called detoxification process whether or not it's needed, and to know if in fact there is spike protein still circulating in your blood. Those tests are about to be launched, and it will be very important information for people to know the degree to which they're at risk.
Mm. Well, that seems to be an optimistic note to maybe end this on, is that it's not all doom and gloom and revolution. There might be some positivity out there.
Yes, my final summary statement is perhaps what I started with, is thank God for those Canadian truckers. Thank God. They were the first to blow the whistle. Guys with dirty fingernails that we all thought were stupid. No, they were very smart, committed, honorable people, family men. In their trucks, they listened to podcasts all the time. It was amazing to speak to them in Ottawa when I was there with them in their convoy and demonstration. It was amazing to speak to these guys. Honorable, hardworking, educated men. Yes, they got dirty fingernails, but my God, do we owe them an incredible honor. They led the way. They didn't succeed. They didn't get what they wanted exactly, but they blew the whistle on the despots running the show. They blew the whistle on corruption that's expanded beyond their initial objective. If it hadn't been for the truckers, we might still have been the Canadian truckers, the Alberta truckers, starting right here on the asphalt in my own city of Edmonton. If it hadn't been for those brave bastards, we might still be accommodating and accommodating and accommodating to the stealth attack of Soros and the World Economic Forum. Thank God for the truckers.
Absolutely. 1,000%. No, those guys were awesome. I loved it. That was great. Yeah, no, they were awesome. That was badass when I got to have them on here. But for now, Dr. Hodkinson, let's wrap this one up. I'm trying to see the positive in all of this. Seems like it's probably going to be a shitty clown show for a while longer, but I do ultimately think everything that's happened the last 3 years was needed. And it's like any spoonful of medicine. It kind of sucks going down, but I think ultimately I think goodness will come from this. I don't know how, I don't know where, but I think it will. Yeah.
I want to say one final thing.
Yeah.
Listen, everyone. What used to be called the season of coughs and colds is nothing of the sort. It is the season of vitamin D deficiency. If you're inside over the winter, by definition, regardless of what you eat, you will be vitamin D deficient. Vitamin D is the most important nutraceutical you can add to your daily regime in order to boost your immune system. It's not just vitamin D looks after your bones and calcium metabolism, yes, but a totally different function, boosting your immune system. Take your 5,000 international units of vitamin D every day, and you will be protecting yourself in ways that you can't imagine. In addition to that, should you come down with a cold or cough, consider the Dr. McCullough's protocol of nasal iodine. You buy a bottle of povidone iodine from your local pharmacy, concentrated solution of iodine. You take with an eyedropper, you make a 10-to-1 dilution, 10 water, 1 iodine. It's actually 9-to-1 to be precise. And you put 4 drops of that in your nostril, each nostril, morning and night. It doesn't taste that bad. You'll feel it trickling back into the back of your throat. Much more effective than ivermectin, strangely enough, at heading off the flu or some other viral infection, RSV, you name it. So remember that. Vitamin D and nasal iodine. You'll be in good state.
Beautiful. Dr. Hodkinson, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your patience in setting this one up. And as always, man, it's fucking great talking to you. I love chatting with you. You're the best.
Thank you, Tommy. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Guys, thank you so much for watching.